Thanks again for joining me for Katy's Corner. This is part of the Work from Home Future of Work series. I am so excited today to be here with Joanne Hanrahan. Joanne, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Kathy.
And welcome to Katy's Corner. I'm excited to speak with you. Let's just start kind of big picture. We have been, as an executive team, talking about mental health and how COVID has impacted mental health for our employees. Tell me a little bit about what you're seeing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, really, COVID has had a huge impact, and it's understandable when you think about what happened. So what happened was we went into fear, isolation, grief, loss, and uncertainty at a huge scale and on a global landscape. So obviously that had a huge impact on the system. So just to tell you a little bit, how we are when we're stressed is really, we have an impact on our physiology. So we feel it in our bodies. So we're aware that we have these threat responses, and they're commonly known as fight, flight, and freeze. So we might feel more anxious, we might be more irritable, we might go into kind of shutdown, maybe not be able to concentrate or finish tasks as well as usual. And they're all our usual stress responses. So normally we have our own window of tolerance, and we can go within that and have our normal day-to-day stresses. But COVID just blew all that out of the water. So people ended up going way out of their normal window of tolerance and their normal way of relating. So we see these people being stuck in these kind of threat responses.
Right. And as you mentioned, there's also been, there's a lot of issues related, everyone has suffered loss of one way or another, right? And it's just been a very scary time. People have been worried about their parents and their children and safety and health and death. And so a lot of kind of issues coming together at once. Beside that, we talk a lot at Extreme about our flexible workplace environment and this Flex First initiative that Kimberly Bassnight has put in place. So we're allowing people to work from home. They have been during COVID. What are some of the issues that you see around that? One of the things that we talk about on our teams is boundaries, and people get on Zoom like this early morning and they go late into the night because it's easy, but it's also created some mental health issues and people are not setting boundaries. So can you talk a little bit about that?
I can, for sure. So in the past we had our commute, and the commute actually helped in coming home from work. We had a wind down period, and maybe you might be taking a call or checking some emails when you got home, but there was a clear boundary. And then the boundaries got very fuzzy during COVID times. And as you say, things are continuing like this now with our hybrid work environment. So I think it's important that there's personal responsibility as well as organizational responsibility in this issue. So personal responsibility around actually feeling safe enough to say no, to looking at the structure of your day, trying to see when suits and when doesn't suit to work. But also in terms of teams and management, they need to talk to employees about what their expectations are, so that there's really open communication around this, and that helps set up that scene and helps people feel more relaxed around the boundaries.
So, and when I talked about you and upfront, I talked about trauma stress informed. So can you talk a little bit about what that is and what that means for organizations?
So trauma informed is what it's termed, but I suppose it may be, as you say, easier for us all to understand in terms of stress informed. So it's knowing a little bit about neuroscience and psychology and how that world is now coming into the business world. And a lot of the big thought speakers and thinkers in the business world are combining the two and are taking the knowledge from the psychology world now.
Mm-hmm.
So what that's about is understanding the physiology that I mentioned earlier, understanding our threat responses that happen even when it's perceived threat. So even when it's feeling uncomfortable at work or not feeling safe enough to maybe make a mistake or ask questions or challenge something. So it's around developing psychological safety, that term that you mentioned, in the workplace, so that people have this kind of shared discussion around inclusivity, and that obviously helps teamwork, helps a feeling of being more respected, that you're safe at work, that you can take risks as well.
Right. So can you just talk, what are some of the strategies for managers like me to create psychological safety in the work environment with my relationships with employees and still maintaining a boundary? It's very difficult to kind of walk that fine line between talking to someone about personal issues and yet maintaining a professional boundary. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. And leaders and managers don't have to be psychotherapists and counselors.
That's good news.
So it's not that we all need to know everybody's personal details, but I think it's that organizations as a whole now are embracing this understanding of how we respond to difficult situations. And COVID has helped us with that. And I'll maybe say a little bit about that in a minute. So for you, Katy, and your teams, it would be really at looking at introverts, extroverts, how our policies, how our structures are, how things are set up that maybe might trigger people into a threat response because they suddenly feel anxious or they're afraid to make a mistake, or they're, and then reevaluating, how can we do this? We've always done it this way. Can we change it that people might feel maybe more at ease around things, safer in their environment, in the work environment? And then, of course, there's bringing in the well-being. And there's a whole load of strategies that organizations can bring in around helping mental health. Again, this is
like what? Give me some examples of that.
So, okay, well, if we look at what research tells us, so the research tells us that obviously getting out in nature helps us cognitively, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, physically, in a whole load of ways. So trying to encourage that, and ourselves knowing that is useful for us. That might be the fast-paced exercise, or it might be the mindful walk, or the gardening, or the sitting under a tree doing nothing. And, that for us to realize that actually doing nothing is bringing ease to our nervous system. So it's not doing nothing. We have this thing that we need to be productive, that we need to be getting our steps in, that it needs to be fast paced. And I think it's trying to encourage a change in that mentality. So that's nature. There's the mindfulness that I know you are a big advocate of, trying to look at, can we bring meditation into our lives? Or can we have a mindful cup of coffee without the phone, without looking at our email while we have our cup of coffee? Can we allow ourselves to take a few breaths?
Staying present.
Staying present, absolutely. And then there's I think of it as a personal menu. So in terms of organizations, they need to know when they're developing well-being programs, for example, that these things are very personal. So one person might like the exercise and another person might like the mindfulness. And sometimes our threat responses, we actually are threatened by what might be proposed. So it's known that it's a personal menu. It might be, the whole selection of things and giving choice.
Now, you have worked with our team and our team in Shannon, Ireland. What are some of the strategies? What are some of the kind of just the tactical, what have you used in terms of strategies just because I love, people are going to be listening to this interview, and I'm interested to showcase what you do, because I think there are lots of companies that would be interested in your work.
Yeah. So I've worked with the Extreme team for a number of years now. So there's been a variety of different strategies. So one session might have been on mindfulness, where I would have them eating chocolate mindfully, before COVID, bringing in herbs and plants and flowers into the boardroom, and having a session that we not only have slides and learn a little about mindfulness, but that we also actually experience things. I would try to encourage people to look at, now that they're working from home, look at their environment where they're working. How can they bring ease? How can you bring ease? You look like you have a beautiful setup there in your room. So how can we bring ease to where we are, so that we maybe have a bunch of flowers, sensory objects on our desk, that we don't have a sink full of dirty dishes that's dysregulating us when we're actually trying to be regulated. And organizations want their employees to be regulated, because the more regulated we are, the more productive we are, and the more better we're able to perform. Yeah.
Well, that's great. I mean, I think this is all very much top of mind, especially, we've gotten out of COVID and Delta and Omicron, and of course there's other variants out there, and we're also all facing the Ukraine situation, which is quite disturbing. So it's always going to be something, but I love that you are so focused on helping organizations with mental health strategies, and how to just better have employees regulated better. I think that's a great term. So any kind of last words of wisdom or advice for managers, senior managers, organizations?
Well, I think we can really learn from COVID. We were all in the same storm. We may not have been in the same boat, but we were in the same storm. So all managers, all leaders experienced what everybody experienced. And that has really given such hope in terms of increased empathy. And leaders need to be very empathic, have an understanding that trauma is not what happened to us, but what happens in our body as a response to it. So really understanding that, and that bringing forward that information and that learning is great hope when we look at crises in Ukraine, climate change, and so on, the bigger pictures, that managers will and leaders will have a better understanding of humanity, and all human and other than human life, maybe, as we focused on the natural world over the last 2 years.
Yeah, well, that's great. And I know that we are a few weeks into spring, and all over the globe, and it's a time of rejuvenation and better weather, and at least in the northern hemisphere, and hopefully people are getting out. And as you said, getting close to nature is a huge aspect of mental health. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you spending some time with me. And I know that people who are going to watch this interview are really going to enjoy it as well. So hope you have a great day, and I look forward to chatting with you soon.
Great.
Thanks, Joanne.
Thank you.